Did you know not eating actually heals your gut? Yes, at night, our brain and our gut, they recover and they rebuild. And there's a lot happening on a cellular level. And if we're pumping in food, it can't do that. So we need a prolonged time with not eating overnight. And that's why really intermittent fasting or time restricted eating has been so powerful because we're giving the gut space to heal. And if you haven't worked on your gut function yet, don't be surprised that you're not functioning at your best. You might be tired, you might be moody, you might be injured, you might be, having other health issues. It's because you haven't worked on your gut. Welcome to the Empower Hour. I'm Heike Fallon, a personal high performance coach, helping my clients with self leadership. And today, my special guest is Derek Johnson, an integrative nutritionist, and he is sharing some super fantastic strategies and habits that you need to implement to heal your gut. And let me welcome Derek Johnson today. Hey, Derek.
Hello.
Derek is an integrative nutritionist, and I'm super excited to have him here today because you're an expert in gastrointestinal health and really brain gut connection. And more so, though, you have an extensive background in knowledge and expertise and experience that brings it all together. And what I really, really, really love about you is you do it with a lot of passion and a lot of fun. And, food has been in the past not my gems due to my health issues. I ended up having not a great relationship to food anymore because I had to eliminate some. And, thanks to your help as well, I was able to really have fun again with food. And at the end of the day, we do need food. But I really want to dig more into today into the gut health and how important it is, because oftentimes my clients ask usually like, okay, well, I need to lose weight, and they look just at the scale, and food is just related to the amount of weight that shows up on the scale, but food is just so much more important. And with losing weight or any other things that you want, like more mental clarity or sleep, helped me tremendously with sleep. We really need to look at a bigger picture and also hone down into the cell level, really. And there's so much research that came out, and I'll love to hear more about it. Especially when it comes to metabolism and mitochondria, and why do we call that gut the second brain or the little brain? I've heard both
Yeah,
both terms.
absolutely. Yeah, we'll dive into it all and try and keep it as you know, you and I will try not to nerd out and keep it
Yeah.
not microscopic, so that we can see things so people can get a better understanding from, as they say, the 30,000 foot view. And I think at the end, just make sure that everybody listening can walk away. I always say with I think 3 wins is always a good goal. Of
Yep.
I'm going to focus on 1 win even, but no more than 3 wins to make notes on maybe accomplishing more over time. But what are the ones that spoke to each person the most, and then work on those, right? Because we know that in making change, at least in the literature, we're both, we love to nerd out, so we'll be careful not to do that too often today. But it takes 66 days, ironically, it being January 19th, to create a habit. There's a lot of great books and things out there, but at least that's what the literature says, which makes sense to me, because people who are, now that we can go back to gyms and things like that, they will change food habits or change workout habits. And then, by March 1st, you're like, oh, I went to the gym and it's back down to, because no one gave it that full time to. My analogy on that, on the nerd side, is when you see your physician, they'll have you do blood work, and if they see something, they'll say come back in 3 months. Well, there's a reason for that. The cells in the body, like red blood cells, they regen about every 90 to 121 days, or so that 90 to 120 days rather, that period is very important to do something for a solid 90 days. And in that, within that 66 days, right, the neuroplasticity, your expertise of the brain, things really start to latch on to that habit. So we've got to stick with it and not, strive for perfection, but just to do small things. So yeah, we can jump into that. We can talk about, you and I were talking earlier about the fasting piece of it. It's very exciting that that's become much more popular. I went to my first fasting seminar in 2009, which changed my whole practice and has since then. And then on the brain gut stuff, it's awesome. I mean, I love Ayurveda, Ayurvedic medicine, the oldest documented medicine, right? And they've been talking brain gut for thousands of years. And at least now, I think it's somewhere around, don't fully quote me on this, it's around 80% of brain gut studies have been done in about the last 8-9 years. And there's a reason, because of the drive, both whether we're talking psychology or whatever the area of expertise in integrative medicine and regular medicine, we see the importance that Ayurveda has been saying for a long time. So it's kind of cool that we have that, data and knowledge, and also with the tests, at least in my practice, with the brilliant, practitioners and people I work with, we have the ability just to ship these great home kits to people, and they can do it in the comfort of their own home. We get that information, and then we can be very specific and target, very myopic or microscopic in being able to find out what's going on.
Yeah, I think you just said one key thing is, and that's how you approach, and I approach too in my with my clients, it's we have to customize. There is
Correct.
not like one size fits all, it's like, people think we can follow certain diets and that will make specifically the change. Well, not the general, like, idea, yes, but when it comes down to really transforming and changing and implementing the habits, we need to really customize it more. Not
Yeah, absolutely.
we're
Yeah.
all different. We're all different. Like
We're all different, and we're all different every year, right? As my son told
yeah.
me this morning, taking him to school, he said, "Dad, you're halfway to 100." And I'm like, "Well, no, I have 2 more months before I'm 50. Leave me alone. I feel 30 or whatever age. But and what I did in my 20s, and I tell a lot of the clients that I work with, versus my 30s versus my 40s, now approaching 50. I mean, it changes, and you're absolutely right. We have to stay on top of that change and not be reactive, right? So you and I are and people in our industry, we're so much about being proactive and figuring out things prior to them happening, and coming up with treating the underlying causation of something versus symptomology, right? Which would be the definition of integrative nutrition, integrative or functional medicine. So yeah, it's very important to customize those things for each person, because even though we're the same thing based on the hormonal decades that people go through, both men and women, although women, sadly for whatever reason, have it harder. But we have that in those metabolic decades. First one's at 30, then we get another one 40. It might be 28, it might be 32, right? It might be 32, it might be 42, and then we certainly get another one at 50s. And things change. So it's very important that we're constantly changing things around to meet the needs and the demands of what our current metabolic state is, or our current biochemistry.
Yeah, and with that said too, I know we're not going to geek out too much, but we do need to understand gut function is directly connected with brain function. Those two are connected via different neurological pathways. And so it's important to understand food is not just gut. Food matters on how we think. It impacts sleep, vice versa. If I'm not sleeping, it can impact my gut function, and I might not be digesting as well. So all of this is differently connected. Yeah. And we need to really hone into customize it, but also there is certain habits, since we talked about implementing, being consistent and integrating habits. So what would you say when it comes to gut health? I know you said consistency is very important, but when it comes to gut health, what habits are generally good ones to implement so we can have the 3 wins, the 3 takeaways?
Yeah, so, we always want to look at someone when I'm working with someone new. We want to first find out like current status, right? There's a physician named Alessio Fasano. I remembered him from when I first got into this many years ago. I personally, in my journey, just to let everyone watching know, I had a lot of underlying gut issues. So my traditional training is in dietetics. I went to school, I got my degree, was going through for my RD. and I felt terrible. And my moods were off. And I'm like trying to follow everything I learned in school. And I'm not going to get into the diatribe of what we're still teaching and why it's all typically wrong. Um, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah.
But it is. And, big food and people and what we're telling people to feed our kids and do things is what's disrupting our microbiome. Right. And we have a whole nother side conversation of glyphosate and different things like that are disrupting in the processed food. So we have to look at current state of where each person is at. And if, it's always interesting to me thinking on, we'll come back to this, but looking at longevity kind of popped in my mind. And I was talking to someone earlier today and I said, well, it's very interesting what Netflix has done and what people are watching, but, your heritage is different than my heritage, but people who live the longest on this planet, they all have different diets, right? Even some drink and smoke and do different things. And it's like, but I've always said, and we've lost the art of being human. And all of these places, whether you're watching a Netflix documentary or otherwise, they're eating real food, right? And back to your point, food is energy. Does your body recognize something, right? I think another thing that comes to mind that I haven't said this one in a while, so this is good. When you've ever eaten a tomato, maybe especially if you've traveled to Europe or something, Italy, and you bite into a tomato almost like an apple, immediately your body goes, wow. It recognizes everything. Everything lights up, right? All of the taste buds, the brain, the neurons, everything's firing. The gut is like, wow, this is real food. We've all been in an airport and had a salad, and then you bite into a tomato, and you kind of go, I mean, I know it's a tomato, but it doesn't really taste like a tomato. So those are the challenges that the brain and the gut are going through on a daily basis of, is this food? Does it bring healing to the body? And I always say, is it heal or does it steal? Or is it stealing? And certainly my kids, right? I've got young kids. We're having fun. We're eating things. We had popcorn last night. We're watching a movie on a school night. It was fun. But the day-to-day, the way, and we'll talk today about, as far as wins are concerned, the two most important wins that, people could come out with, I call mastering your morning and mastering your evening. So how do you start your day and how do you end your day are by far the most important thing, because those are what produce consistency. And if you start the day the wrong way, right? I call the bacteria in the gut bugs. And if you feed the bugs the wrong thing, those bugs are going to be like, I want more of that, right? Yeah. The best thing about the human body is, it adapts to any environment or habit. But the worst thing about the human body is it adapts to any environment or habit. And it will take you down the wrong path. And it's not a question of if you'll continue to eat those foods that you shouldn't be eating, it's how much. So, pattern, we can bring in fasting into this, and understanding what we feed our bodies is key, because those are the foods that you're going to crave. Just like if you talk to someone who's like, oh, I drink water, and they stay hydrated, they're thirsty and they want it. And then people who don't drink water go,
I don't need it.
I don't need it. I'm not thirsty, right? Because the body's like, oh, no, I'm good. I'm creating a defense mechanism because you're not feeding me water, so I'm not going to need it.
Yep, it adapted.
Right? And if you wake up and you have sugar, you're going to be, I don't know if they still do this, but it's an old analogy. I've been doing this for, over 25 years, is that, that one of my mentors told me, is like, it's the dog and the greyhound that's chasing the rabbit around the track. That's you. And if you spike your sugar in the morning, right? And this is great thing as far as if people want to write something down to remember, the brain, right, runs on two things, sugar or fat. And you get to choose. And it doesn't mean we can't have sugar, healthy sugars like berries and things like that. But if you start the day and you spike your sugar and you feed the microbiota, the bugs, the wrong things, you're going to be craving those things, right? We get overgrowth of bacteria and candida and all sorts of things in the gut. And people wonder why they struggle with weight loss. And they wonder why they struggle with stress and anxiety. And back to the brain-gut connection, right? For the people that may have heard this before, but I mean, where do you get butterflies? In your stomach, right? That saying, go with your gut.
Yep.
that gut instinct. So if we're feeding our bodies foods that are, stealing and not healing, and the wrong thing, and we're creating the wrong diversity of good and bad bugs, for lack of a better word, then you're going to crave those foods, and people wonder why they can't stay on track, why they're not sleeping well, why they're craving foods, why they're gaining weight, why they have inflammation, why they're tired. I mean, the list is like, yeah, okay, when someone comes through and they show me what they're eating, and I know, like, these are all the things I'm feeling, I'm like, makes perfect sense to me. So it's important that we, and strive to make small change, but and not, and also understand, because as you've known me over the years, I also like to have fun. Like, I'm the guy I'm gonna go golfing with my buddies and bend the rules, and I'm gonna go out with my kids and be like, yeah, let's go get some. There's a gelato place that opened next to us. I'm like, yeah, let's go get some gelato. But when you have a strong, what I would call metabolically flexible body, it can enhance those things. People let's go back to Italy, that are, having a dessert or having some gelato or something, they eat it and they feel fine. But when you're unbalanced, which most people listening to this who are struggling are, the result of the food that you're eating is different when you don't have a balanced gut, you don't have a balanced brain, right? And Alessio Fasano, which I mentioned earlier, was one of the first guys to bring something to light called leaky gut. And when he first brought it to light, everyone was like, even in traditional gastroenterology, they were like, he was at Stanford, brilliant gastroenterologist, and they went, this is madness. Well, we then created a drug that works on something called zonulin. We won't nerd out on that, but then they recognized it as an actual thing. And he believed most people in the United States, especially with our poor dietary habits and lifestyle, have permeability also. And so when I was first healing and getting down to the bottom of this after my issues and my health journey, and I met a functional medicine doctor after completing my dietetic stuff in school, he's like, yeah, you have something called leaky gut. And I was like, am I going to die? I was like, that sounds really, really bad. He's like, no, it's, and it's also called intestinal permeability. And I was like, I have no idea. But so it explained a lot of why my brain gut connection was so poor, why I was having the issues with sleep. And I played collegiate sports, and I was always involved in why I was, nowhere near my optimal health. And it was a lot of the foods I was eating. Biggest cause for me that I traced back was I was put on antibiotics for acne.
Yep.
And antibiotics are good, but they're certainly overused. And I just stayed on it. I didn't know. Like, I was just like, well, the doctor told me to take this. And then
Yep.
when I started taking courses in college, I went, why am I still taking this? I don't understand. But it just trashed my stomach. And certainly college diets aren't typically great. It's a combination of that led me into that spiral. And then once I learned how to heal that and really understood the food allergies and food sensitivities I had, really made an impact. So, I think to help people understand wins, maybe we start with how to start the day. And that will lead into the like optimal gastrointestinal health. Like, how do you optimize those things throughout the day? And so something that you and I are passionate about, that's not related to food, that I think is definitely a win takeaway, that people probably are going to be shocked that I bring up, is sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
And people have no idea. So I don't care what religion you are. I don't care where you're from. I mean, I care if I know you, but I'm just saying it doesn't matter. No one is going to argue this statement. Humans are designed to be outside.
Yep. 100%.
No one's going to say, well, no, no, no. I'm like, well, what did we do before we had buildings? I don't care if you think the earth is 2,000 years old or 2 million years old. We're designed to be outside. And it has a huge impact on our mental health, our microbiome, our gut, and longevity. So it's really important. So, starting your day or mastering your day for wins. Everyone wakes up dehydrated, right? And most people have heard this, right? About, there you go, drinking your water. I have a little,
Water, but in the morning. So
right?
ever since I had my struggles and you helped me way back when, that's since then regularly. First thing in the morning, water, particularly when I'm having my coffee, since we're both coffee lovers.
Yeah.
Always the water first.
Yeah, and people have been drinking coffee and espressos, and on a sidebar, caffeine is not the problem.
Nope.
It's what you put in it, how much, right, and when. So water, Ayurveda, let's go back there. Lemon, I personally use salt. Sidebar, be careful of Himalayan salt. It's very good for you, but since it's become popular, they're full of heavy metals. So look where it comes from. If you want to go safe, go with Celtic sea salt. And if you want one place to start for everyone listening to this, you wake up, 12 to 16 ounces, ideally room temperature. That's an Ayurveda trick rather. I don't buy lemons because I don't have the time to slice them and deal with the seeds and I just buy organic lemon juice in a glass jar at the store. Very simple.
That was the best trick I learned from you.
Right, little splash, 1 or 2 tablespoons. I don't measure, just whatever. Little pinch of Celtic sea salt. Start your day that way. Hydrate before you dehydrate, because every human is dehydrated. I don't care if you slept 6 hours, hopefully not 6, but more, 7 or 8. And then you can have your coffee, right? You and I have talked about that. So that's a great way. And why? Even if you go into PubMed, which no one's going to, but you and I love probably looking at things. There's scientific literature and support and studies on the power of lemon.
Yep.
So starting your day with lemon juice, salt for the gut, the brain, right pH, and understanding what these things do is a great thing to do. So you start your day off mastering by, I'm going to wake up, water, lemon, salt. If you don't like lemon and salt, just drink water. I don't care. And if you, like someone in my household, I won't say who, is like, I do not like room temperature. I do not like hot water. I'm like, I don't care, fine, drink it cold. We can break Ayurveda. It's not a big deal. Just hydrate.
Yeah.
And then have your coffee. And make sure that you're getting direct, unexposed, no sunglasses. I don't care if the sun's out. I don't care if it's drizzling. And if you're a coffee drinker or a tea drinker, tea's amazing. This is a iced tea I'm drinking right now, actually. Someone sent it to me from Instagram, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna ice it. So that's what I'm drinking. It's a hibiscus. It's actually really good. And so, you start your day and you just stand outside for 5 or 10 minutes and, get sun. It can even be indirect. Sunlight bounces off things, clearly. Just you can't get the direct sunlight from the morning. So if you can, I walk my kids to the bus stop. This morning I drove because my son had tutoring when I was saying we drove. But you still get it even if you can't see the sun.
Yep.
And it's very important. So that's a big win. And the hydration. And then let's tie this into fasting. So, and I know there's going to be, if there's 100 people listening to this, there will be at least 5 that haven't heard this, which is super interesting. Because I remember the first time I heard it, I think it was certainly after I was in college, many years ago. And someone said, oh, when you break your fast, breakfast. I was like, oh, that's how they were. That's how they came up with the word breakfast. I'm like, how did I not know that? So when you break your fast, we have to think about the terms of fasting, and everyone says, well, I'm not into that. And everybody fasts. Mm-hmm. You stop eating and you start eating. They're fasting. So we have to kind of think about when we break our fast. And with the popularity, everyone's different. Your age, your gender, in terms of men and women. Women have to be more careful with how long they fast. Typically, not everybody. Everyone's different. Workouts and things like that. But one of the biggest things in terms of how we sold the food guide pyramid, won't go after big food here, but in terms of like selling grains at the bottom, like how I was taught in school, and even the new food guide pyramid, which is also a joke, is how do we sell our grains, right? Cereal, when they came out with Lucky Charms and Tony the Tiger, when I was a kid and all these things, was like, oh, we're going to sell these grains. And it was, the food guide pyramid was created by lobbyists. It wasn't created by anyone that had any nutrition or medical degree. And so we're told breakfast is the most important meal of the day. That's not true. Now, there's certain things for children and stuff. We're going to keep this as an adult conversation. But it's important for us to, know that, back to what we said before, the brain runs on fat or sugar. Mm-hmm. So you're going to set the tone and master your morning by hydration, sunlight, and when you break your fast, what are you going to break it with?
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's different. Some people like things. I have this list I call the demonized list, and we've demonized butter. I was like, oh, really? You're going to go to Italy or France with, I can't believe it's not butter, with full of seed oils? And they're going to laugh you right out of the kitchen, right? I mean, people have been using butter, grass-fed butter is like one of the best things on the planet.
Yep.
And so it's important to, which is the popularity, by the way, of the putting fat in MCT powders and oils and things in people's coffees, which we could talk about. So you want to get the brain running on fat and then figure out when you break your fast. I would say if someone is struggling with blood sugar, which is typical, right? 80% of America pre-diabetic, diabetic, overweight, or obese. So I think that's a big target population for audiences. If you finished eating the night before at, let's say 7:30, pick a number, there's typically no reason to be eating before 9:30. But for most people, like around that would be 14 hours, right? And I don't suggest starting, if you've never done this before, doing anything over that. I think it's a good standpoint. Being more aggressive, you need to work with a proper healthcare practitioner, your physician who understands this about fasting. And we don't have time today to talk about water fasting and extended fasts, but just saying, like, most people are hungry because they've trained the body to wake up and eat, or they put sugar in their coffee or their tea or whatever they're having, or they take a bite of their kids' thing or whatever. They get the brain running on sugar and then they're hungry all day. The opposite happens when you don't eat. You're less hungry, which is kind of fascinating. And fasting, ironically, back to the religious thing, is part of all religions. Mm-hmm. And a lot of cultures don't wake up and have cereal. That's the America thing. Or don't wake up and have, bagels or whatever it is. And I'm not saying you can't do those, but we don't want that to be daily practice. That's not a part of mastering your morning. So, protein's very important in my opinion, and many others. Eggs, in terms of my demonized list, we've demonized sun, we've demonized salt, we've demonized eggs, we've demonized red meat, all of these different things. It's like, look what most people eat around the world.
Yep.
And they're doing great. And we're just like, oh yeah. And we have these studies coming up. That tough study that was like, Lucky Charms are healthier than eggs. I was like, what? I don't understand.
Oh, I like that gummy bears are gluten-free.
Yeah, and gluten-free. Like, I'm a big advocate of, gluten-free, even if you don't know you have a sensitivity because of what we've done to our gluten.
Yeah, well, the thing is too is the by taking out and thinking these things aren't good, the replacements have so much stuff in it that is just not healthy because there's so many preservatives or so many additives put in, so it even tastes somewhat like something. That's right. I think a big issue.
Back to the tomato, right?
Yeah.
Is it food?
Yeah, exactly. I do want to just very quickly come back because I think the intermittent fasting helped me. That was one big thing that shifted for me in figuring out what was the right amount for me, but definitely having a minimum of the 12 hours has been a game changer for me because of my unfortunate overuse of antibiotics, because of my health issues. My gut was completely I called it like bare, nothing left. But the key is too, it's not for us. I think the problem was too, is it got so popular with, because people was like, oh, why are you doing that? You don't need to lose weight. I'm like, well, no, it's not about weight. This is about at night during sleep, our brain actually recovers and rejuvenates, as well as our gut. And we do need to have that more extended period of time so that the whole gut can actually rebuild overnight. It does rebuild overnight. So if we have that like 6 hours or so, that's not enough time for actually rejuvenating as far as on a cellular level.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, we're not designed, back to, humans, and me saying we've lost the art of being human. We didn't have, oh, I need a snack. I'm just going to grab my little, this is an electrolyte. This is my favorite electrolyte, actually. Like, oh, I need a snack. Yeah. Or I'm going to be able to stop at a store and buy things, and I can eat all the time, and I'm supposed to eat 6 times a day. I mean, again, there's always exceptions to the rule, but most people were taught hunger. I was telling a parent this at my son's soccer game. I don't know, it was like 6 months ago or something. And I said, my wife was, she was telling the story, and this is what streamed it, but this will be good for the listeners. So when my kids and I would go on a bike ride, I bring one water bottle, kind of like when I was a kid. We drink out of hoses, actually. And so no snacks. Are you hungry? Do you need a snack? Are you hungry? Do you need a snack? We've like trained ourselves that hunger is bad.
Yeah.
Hunger is not bad. Being famine is bad, right? And that's a sad thing that's worldwide. But hunger, we've made a bad thing, and it's a good thing. In terms of fasting, right, there's something that you and I are familiar with called autophagy. And the literature is very clear for people who do extended fast and the decreased risk of cancer. And a lot of people do this because your body like basically gets rid of bad cells and rebuilds new ones to kind of make it simple. It only happens when you fast.
Yep.
So in terms of longevity and living longer, people who live the longest on this planet eat less. I mean, it's pretty simple. And in terms of wins, outside of mastering your morning, I call this this is what I have in mind. Derek's in an elevator. He's going only 3 floors. He has less than 30 seconds. Everyone in the elevator wants to know, what's the one tip? I'm going to give you one tip or one question. And I ask people, what do you do in terms of drink or consume 3 hours before you go to bed? That would be my one question. If I just met someone and they've said, if you could assess me, that's the question I would ask them. Because the most important fast that doesn't get a lot of attention in terms of intermittent fasting, by the way, I'm just going to get this out of the way because it's been on my mind since we started. It's technically called time restricted eating.
Okay.
And you know this, but for the listeners, they need to hear intermittent fasting. We have to put that in our titles for searches and stuff like that. Intermittent fasting is something completely different. It's called technically called time restricted eating. And the most restricted time, the most important time for fasting is, what do you do? 2 hours would be like bare bones minimum. What do you do 3 hours before you go to bed? And I would say another thing that comes to mind, and Heike knows me, you just got to like shut me up because I'll just talk for like 4 hours, is it's more important. I would take someone because of sleep. Dr. Matthew Walker wrote a book called Why We Sleep. It's the best book ever written on sleep, in my opinion, ever. And I would take, especially in older life, because sleep's so important, especially in adolescence, but I would take someone who's a decent nutrition plan, who's a great sleeper, than someone who had the best nutrition plan for them, but was a poor sleeper. Sleep's that important. And all of the things we do before we go to bed with technology and the foods that we eat will dictate how well we sleep. We've all eaten or drinking in the holidays. That was, we just got through those. And then you wake up the next day and you're like, oh my gosh, that was just brutal. So that fast before we go to bed and what we do, hands down, could be the most important thing that people take away. So back to the very beginning of when we spoke today, that's why I tell people, you have to master your morning and have a routine and stick with it. Not every day, most days, but you also have to fast and be very specific about what you do before we go to bed. You probably see all my glasses here that I wear. I'm a nerd. I love all the biohacking stuff as well, so that I can bend the rules and not break them. On the sleep thing, we used to call these things, back when I did this thing with one of my favorite companies called Designs for Health, and I'm on their scientific advisory board. They're a great company, and we used to call them clinical pearls. And people are like, "What's that?" I'm like, "I don't know. I learned it like 20 years ago, and they still stuck in my head." But clinical pearl, because this is related to sleep and mastering your evening. If I was stuck on a desert island, or in the ocean, and like I had a genie bottle and I could like rub it, and they'd be like, you get one wish and you can only have one supplement with you. I asked this at my conferences. Most people caught on, but they didn't catch on when I first learned the answer many years ago. The most important supplement for you to take is I would get sunlight, real sunlight, in terms of vitamin D. The most important supplement for you to take is magnesium. Hands down. It's not even a question. Everyone I work with, I'm like, if you're going to work with me, you're taking magnesium. Yeah, there's 7 or 8 types of magnesium, but it's so important to get a good, people will call it chelated or they'll call it chelated magnesium before you go to bed. And people are going to think, well, how much? Be careful what you buy on Amazon, but there are some good ones. A good chelated magnesium, around 300 to 400 milligrams, 20 to 45 minutes before you go to bed. And then really thinking about, what am I putting in my body? So my kids, this will help parents out there. And for me, when I get hungry, I'm like, everybody every now and we could get the munchies, right? And you're like, hey, maybe I didn't eat enough today, or I'm watching a show. My kids are like chomping on popcorn. I'm like, oh my gosh, now I'm really hungry. Um, you know, we have to just be careful of what we eat. So because the brain runs on fat or sugar, but all calories are energy in terms of what we're eating, we just have to be really mindful. Just everyone should just. So I'm a big pickle guy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a salty crunchy. I'm not a sweet. I'm a salty crunchy
I'm the
person.
sweet one.
And so, so the sweet people, so salty crunchy people, pickles. I love pickles. By the way, it's only a pickle if it's in the refrigerated section. Another clinical pearl. Ideally, I like Bubby's pickles because they're not full of vinegar, and they're how we used to make pickles. Other things that can be helpful for people that are, there's a company on a no affiliation called Dr. John's that's on Amazon, and they sell xylitol. He's a dentist that created these candies with xylitol. It's a very safe and effective alcohol sugar that actually kill the bacteria because they can't make energy to create cavities.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm also a big fan of Zevia, which is a stevia-based soda. Someone just, be careful, don't get the 2 or 3 that they have with caffeine. But we love the root beer ones in our house, and I'll just take a couple sips of that if I am craving, because sometimes I crave sweets. Something like that, where you can just have something that kind of just turns down that, like, I need something, and takes it from an 8 to like a 4.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of cool things that you can do. But if you can really figure out a way to master how you start your day, and then we'll talk more about the food and when we break our fast. And I just call people, pick your window. If you want to start with 12, great. I start at 9. I wouldn't end at 9. I would start at like 7:30 and end at 7:30 typically. And 14 hours is a good place, especially for those people that have blood sugar issues and are trying to lose weight. And then I will encourage people to find people that actually know what they're doing to help you along the way, so you can get the right laboratory testing and things like that. But the PM fast is the hardest, but ironically, typically the hardest things to do, the most important.
That is so true. But that's why we also always say to start small, right?
Yeah.
Start small. Don't do everything at once.
No.
The brain doesn't like it. So if you're listening, hey, start with that water in the morning and add a
Yeah.
little lemon or salt, or start with paying attention in the evening. Start small. Don't do it all at once. I do want to ask you because obviously years ago, I like 10 years ago, when clients asked me what to do, it was definitely always like, oh man, it's like so all over the place, because we didn't have ways to really measure very well and
Right.
test things. And I'm a big everything I'm doing is like we're assessing, we're implementing, we're reassessing, did it work? Because just taking supplements randomly for years and years and years, that doesn't make you healthy. It needs to be the right amount, the right ones for you. So I would love to hear a little bit more about the testing that you started implementing more, because now we can test our gut health and
Yeah.
and and really make it more customized and really more effective as far as the foods we should eat, what we need to change, and also retest, obviously, to see the changes.
Yeah. Right. And so those are all fantastic points. And thank you so much for asking me that. I almost forgot. It's important to go see your doctor, but even one of my good friends who's after 10 years, he's my client now, which is great because he got older and he's like, okay, I want to listen. He's an ER doc, brilliant doctor. And, but his training, he's just like, trained differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of us go get our get your physical, get your blood work, and they might tell you have high cholesterol and low vitamin D. But there's not a lot of optics. I call it the I'm not dying test. It's very important to do. You have to do it. And it's not anywhere near the physician's fault. This is just like our system. You go in, you get these things tested, and we tell you, good, do it. But
And it's in the range, you're looking good.
look in the range, which the range is taken from about
Yeah.
6% of the population, which is overweight, pre-diabetic, or obese. Sorry, I'm going to throw that in there. And we'll see next year, or take this medication. Medications can be helpful, but I don't think they should always be the first line of defense. And so those labs are important, but people will say, like, well, do I need supplements? What should I take? And I've been blessed, and I feel very blessed to work with these integrative physicians. I'm affiliated with several integrative medicine practices. As you know, I was brick and mortar in one for 20 years. But the beauty of being telehealth now and working still with all my brilliant physicians and practitioners is we have test kits I just ship to people's homes. And that's part of my program. When people sign up, I'm like, great, here's my plan. Here's my 3-month plan. Here's what we're going to do to get an assessment of where you're at, right? Because when people want change, we want to see results quickly. But I usually tell people, and I'll come back to the testing, look, you've had, I would say, let's say it started in your 20s and you're lucky to be in your 40s. Most people have been beating their bodies up for a minimum of about 20 years. And I was like, even if it took 1 year to heal, if you were a financial person, I think a 20-to-1 ratio, you'd be all over that. But most people want it to happen quickly. Like, I want to fix this. I want the weight off quickly. It's like, well, wait a minute. You've been beating your body up for a long time. So patience, right? It's a very good virtue to have. So the testing is very interesting, and it's come so far. And I've been, again, blessed to work with these companies. DSL Diagnostic Solution Labs is one of my favorites. And they have 2 tests that we run through a thing called Spotlight Testing through a company that I mentioned before, Designs for Health. I don't get paid by them. I just seek out the best, like you do, in terms of the people that have the best. In terms of supplements, yeah, we have to be careful. I mean, when someone says I take a fish oil and I bought it at X, think of a large chain store. How did it get from fish to capsule? What did that fish look like? How did they put that in the capsule? I'm always like, these are questions that should be in your head, not just I took a fish oil, because like a lot of times we'll test and retest and they're like, it's the same. I'm like, well, that wasn't, pick a country that you perhaps, that is in the news as of late. And you're like, yeah, it was made in that country and there's no regulation and they're just selling you snake oil, for lack of a better phrase, right? So it's very important. That's the beauty about the test. When we do our test, I can show them nutrition and lifestyle, number 1. Here's the supplements for you not getting in your diet because you hate fish and you took a good fish oil and you took vitamin D and you took magnesium. Here's your post-test. Looks amazing, right? And they feel better, most importantly. The best lab on the planet is you. So with me, I require everyone to do 2 tests. One is a metabolomics test. It's a really cool test that looks at, how do I describe it? It's a urine test that looks at all breakdowns of things that tells us what you're deficient in. So not just like your B vitamins, it looks at neurotransmitter function. The docs I work with that have created these tests are really cool. Looks at like detoxification pathways. So when I can say, well, here's everything you're getting with your lifestyle and your nutrition, and here's what you're taking, or you're taking too much of that, like back off. But probably most importantly, here's what you're not getting, right? Unfortunately, in the United States, back to the tomato thing, we lack in the United States something called soil, which is why our stuff isn't nutrient dense, right? It all comes down to color and nutrient density. And so we can find out exactly what you need. And it's important to do those labs at least annually so that we can change, right? What I did in my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And then the gastrointestinal, the gut, which is my favorite. It's no one's favorite test to do. Like, I'm like, great, guess what? You're going to do is a stool test. And people are like, what? By the way, the men are always the babies. The moms, I think, because they're just like, moms are way tougher than guys. I don't care what any guy says. I'm like, you're way tougher than we are. You're better at multitasking. You're just stronger people. And the mom's like, yeah, I'll do it. And I was like, God, why are the guys always the wimps? I get it. My wife has 2 kids. I always tell that she has 3 kids because I'm the 3rd kid. Let's just be honest. Sidebar. So we can look at the diversity of the good and the bacteria. How, to your point, how are they affecting the brain and the gut? Remember where you get that gut feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you get butterflies? The foods that you're eating, how well are you assimilating? How well are you digesting based on those things? Oh, another sidebar. Did you know this, but everyone listening, at some point in school, you learned two things. You learned something called fight, flight, and rest, digest. There's two states in the body called parasympathetic and sympathetic, making it simple, right? We're not nerding out on the sympathetic nervous system. And do you know why they call it rest, digest? Anyone? You can't hear me, or you can't speak back to me. Um, think about how long a dinner is in these other cultures throughout the world. 2+ hours, because they're seated, they're breathing, breath work, very important. Um, and they're digesting their food, laughing, hanging out. We eat and run, and the stomach's like, what the is going on here? And so it's very important for us to understand what's going on with the populations of the gut in the stomach. Do you need a probiotic? I don't know. Prebiotics are much more important. That's another conversation. But that way I can really see where they're at in terms of a time shot and just snapping time and saying, here's what the gut's saying, here's what's going on with the brain and the gut, specifically the gut, why you might be feeling things. And if someone's struggling, I'm just kind of speaking to me right now, and then I'll shut up. They did these studies a long time ago. I think this is the most fascinating thing. This is years ago, at least 15. And so they find identical twins, right? And this is all about gut, everybody. We're going to talk poop here for a second. I'll talk poop for hours. And so they took identical twins, and they would find one twin that was overweight, and that one was still like in normal weight, right? In terms of the BMI, which I call the bad mass index. That's another conversation. And so they took mice, and don't ask me how they did this, I don't know, but they do something called a fecal transplant. Fecal meaning poop. And they took the overweight twin poop, and they put it in the mice, which is super cool, I think. And the mice, without changing their diet or their exercise, became overweight.
Yep.
And then they took the poop from the regular weight twin, identical twin, and put it back into the mice, and the mice went back to normal weight without changing diet or exercise. And in places like, I think it's Finland, don't quote me on this, Denmark, for sure Germany, and there's another Scandinavian company, they're doing fecal transplants reversing type 2 diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's how important the gut is in terms of blood sugar control, weight. I mean, kind of how we started our conversation out. So when people are like, what do you mean we're working with you, Derek? And I got to go, I need these labs to find out what's going on. I can't just get your basic blood test. And then even working with the physicians I get to work with, we need this extra stuff to help, right? Because at the end of the day, I don't think anyone listening to this would say, like, anyone want to live not just longer, but thrive? We now know, like, we can't change our chronological age, but we can both reverse and slow down our biological age. And the literature and the science is very clear. And it's very cool that we have these things. But, and this is literally the last thing I'll say before you chat, is that in an integrative medicine and integrative nutrition, at least in my post-training, when we're starting to figure out, like, what's going on with this person, you will find, if you read any good book that's come out from the Mark Hymans of the world or whoever are out there, they all say start with the gut.
Yep.
For a reason.
Yep. We do have to start with the gut. Now, we covered actually a bunch of things that impact the whole gut. So sleep is super important.
Yes.
The what we eat, when we eat, and how long we don't eat matters,
Yep.
right? Our stress level matters. Light matters.
And stress goes to the gut.
Go to the gut. Clearly medication matters. We both have unfortunately experienced it, and exercise matters. I love that you said that with the dinner, because there's actually been studies out now that our gut function improves too with socializing, with social connection, the laughing, has an impact on how our gut is. Like,
How you digest the food.
yeah, how you
Yeah,
digest food. So the funny thing, since you said that, when, since I'm German and when I moved here, it was, and we'll go out with some of my German friends, we couldn't handle that the waiters always brought right away the check. And we're like, no, like in Germany, you chit
that's so
chat.
funny. I
When
mean,
you're at the
it's so
restaurant, you
true.
chit
Like
chat. Nobody brings a check. Nobody tries to get you off the table because you were there to chit
part
chat.
of your culture. Yeah, yeah.
That's part of it. And it was just so odd. And we would used to ignore it. And the waiters would come back and we're like, I'm sorry, we're not leaving yet.
Yeah, we'll pay, but we're gonna be here
We
for at
can
least
pay,
another
but we're
45
going to stay
minutes.
seated here.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but that's
but
just the culture. Yeah, it's so
but
good.
social connections and also interestingly, even feeling valued and purpose in life, all that has shown now to impact our gut microbiome. Now I'm saying butt since you
Yeah.
talked about
Well, it's connected, right? What's
gut,
interesting is
butt
that we're funny.
microbiome.
We're just one giant tube from our nose to our butt. So I mean, that's all gut.
So all of those things matter, and that's what I know. Since we know each other for quite some time, and knowing you approach it really as a holistic approach. With it does matter what people's lifestyle is. It does matter what other
Huge.
habits they have, and that's why that morning routine is so important, and that's why an evening routine is so important. And yes, we can fine tune all the foods and the information to find you and how to get started with you is all in the description. So, but it matters to customize it, particularly when somebody is struggling with, let it be sleep, let it with weight management, let it be with, big two now is thinking, right? Our cognitive function,
Yeah.
how brain fog do I feel? It all matters. But to get started with you, how does it usually look like?
So I do. It's very simple. One of my business, we'll call advocates was like, you still do your discovery Zooms? I'm like, yeah, that's like my favorite thing. So my office, which you can supply an email, we do discovery Zoom. It's 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it takes a lot of time, and people, some of my mentors and stuff, I can't believe you still do it. I'm like, I want to meet the person. B, I need to make sure like we're correct. Like they're comfortable with what I do. This is the program I have. And sometimes people will say things I'm like, oh no, you need to go see A or B, right? It doesn't happen often, but it does happen. So just even if it happens once a year, I would still continue to do these. And it happens more than that. And so that's it. We just do Discovery Zoom. You learn more about how I work in the program. And then I say, hey, here's how it works. I have a 3-month program with the labs included. And then after 3 months, we reassess. And I'm very much, as you and I have known each other for a long time, into maintenance and understanding that let's stay connected. Whether we talk once a month, minimally, I require once a quarter so that we can stay connected with making those changes, because everybody can get fairly sideways, and not too sideways in like 2 or 3 weeks, but you can get very sideways in life in 2 or 3 months, right? I mean, look at the holidays. So that's it. Just a discovery free 10-minute Zoom on understanding where you're at and how I can help, and making sure it's the right fit. And then if that's something that people are willing to really, commit to, it's a commitment to really wanting to make change. And that's how it starts. And then, answer any questions that people have, at that time.
I love it. Yeah, actually, my husband who did your cleanse, I want to say 2, 3 years ago, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
He still he turned that because your approach is so, it really makes it simple. And with that, he chose what works best for his schedule. And after he was done with the cleanse, he actually continued. So he's still doing his smoothies in the morning.
Oh,
And
awesome.
yeah, I mean, he doesn't want to, he did it mainly also to, kind of shift and lose a couple pounds, but it wasn't the goal anymore. So he continued though with the same, with the fibers and all the,
Yeah. Like mastering your morning, and then
and
mastering, like it just sets up like how do you start and how do you end your day. And then you can still have fun, still have a
Yep,
drink,
three
still
three
eat
years
this.
3 years in, he's got that habit going,
Yeah,
and
that's amazing.
loves it, and really changed his life, and it's about that consistency that changes your life. It's
A 100%.
not about the, oh, what do I do the next 4 to 6 weeks. It's about, how do I implement that kind of habit for the long term, that it becomes really part of my life,
Correct. Right.
and
Not a January juice cleanse to obliterate the last 11 months. Like that's not how the human body works.
that's not how it works. Well, thank you, Derek. This was so
That was
informative.
so much fun. Yeah, thank you. It's so good to see you and connect. And we have to find a, as I sidebar time for us to nerd out in the latest and greatest because we don't need to bore everyone else watching this, but we should do that soon.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And information again is below in the description to reach out and connect with Derek, and also follow him on Instagram and Facebook. He has great information there all the time as well. With that said, we're probably gonna have another one someday, because of there's so much great stuff
Sure.
happening and evolving. So
Absolutely.
thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me, and keep up the great works. I'm loving all your content, and you're doing such a phenomenal job. And you definitely do things that most people have no idea exists, which I've always appreciated about you. So keep up the great works, and I'm always here to support you in any way that I can.
Thank you.
Okay.